Jake Morrison stood in the main hall of Meridian Station and felt smaller than he ever had in his life. The ceiling stretched up so high, he could barely see it through the forest of alien bodies around him. Lights from 100 different worlds mixed together, making everything look strange and beautiful and terrifying all at once. He was 19 years old and very far from home. The diplomatic academy had prepared him for a lot of things. They taught him how to bow correctly to the Yulani. They taught him which colors offended the Grexians. They taught him 17 different ways to say hello without using his voice. But they never taught him how to feel normal when surrounded by beings that could crush him, poison him, or simply ignore him into nothing. Jake adjusted his uniform for the 5th time in as many minutes. The blue and white colors of Earth's diplomatic corps felt too bright here, too obvious. Everyone could see he was new. Around him, the ceremony continued. It was some kind of trade agreement between 3 species he could barely pronounce. The Velkari representatives stood on a raised platform in the center of the hall. They were tall and covered in dark green scales that shimmered under the lights. Their eyes were gold and cold. They moved with the kind of confidence that came from ruling 12 star systems. Jake's supervisor, Helen Brooks, stood near the front with the other senior diplomats. She hadn't looked at him once since they arrived. He was supposed to observe and learn. Those were his only instructions. Watch and learn, and try not to embarrass Earth. He was doing fine until the ceremony reached its conclusion. The Velkari ambassador, a massive male named Thelxis, stepped down from the speaking podium. The crowd began to shift and move. This was the informal part, where different species would mingle and make small talk. Jake had been briefing himself on this for days. He moved forward, trying to find a good position to observe from. The crowd was thick. Bodies pressed against him from all sides. A Hentari accidentally stepped on his foot with one of its 6 legs. Jake bit back a grunt of pain and kept moving. Then, he saw it. The Velkari greeting platform. It was a circular space, about 10 feet across, set into the floor. The surface was made of some kind of blue crystal that glowed softly. Beautiful. Several Velkari were gathered around it, engaged in what looked like an important conversation. Jake wanted to get closer to hear. The Academy had stressed the importance of learning by listening. He stepped forward, squeezed between 2 large aliens he didn't recognize, and suddenly found himself standing on the platform. The crystal felt warm under his boots. Everything stopped. The Velkari conversation died instantly. Ambassador Thelxis turned his head slowly, his golden eyes fixing on Jake, with an intensity that made Jake's stomach drop. "What?" Thelxis said slowly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. "Is this creature doing?" And Jake looked down. He was standing on the platform, just standing there. His boots were on the crystal. He looked back up and saw that every Velkari in the area was staring at him. Not just looking, staring. The way someone might stare at an insect that had crawled onto their dinner plate. "I'm sorry," Jake said quickly. "I didn't mean to. You walk on the greeting stone with your feet covered?" Another Velkari spoke, her voice sharp enough to cut. "You stand where only scales may touch? You desecrate our sacred tradition with your ignorance?" Jake stepped back immediately, off the platform. His face burned hot. "I apologize. I didn't know." "Ignorance is not an excuse," Thelxis said. His voice had gone quiet now, which was somehow worse than if he'd shouted. "It is a condemnation. The Velkari have been part of this council for 800 cycles. Our traditions are known to all civilized species." The way he said civilized made it clear what he thought of humans. Jake opened his mouth to apologize again, but Helen Brooks was suddenly there. She pushed past him, her face tight with anger. But the anger wasn't directed at Thelxis. "Ambassador Thelxis, please accept my sincerest apologies," Helen said, bowing low in the Velkari style. "This junior liaison is new. His training is incomplete. I take full responsibility for his actions." "Your responsibility?" Thelxis tilted his head. And yet it was not you who violated our sacred space. Tell me, Coordinator Brooks, do humans not teach their young the difference between respect and disrespect? We do, Ambassador. I assure you. Then this one is either unteachable or willfully disrespectful. Thelxus looked back at Jake. Which is it, young human? Are you stupid or arrogant? The hall was completely silent now. Jake could feel hundreds of eyes on him. Aliens from species he'd never even seen before were watching, judging. Neither, sir, Jake managed to say. I made a mistake. A serious one. I apologize to you, and to all the Velkari people. He apologizes, Thelxus said to the crowd, his voice dripping with mockery. How gracious. The primitive speaks words of courtesy after showing profound disrespect. Should we be grateful? One. Someone in the crowd laughed. Then someone else. The sound spread like fire. A Srathi representative, its insect-like body chittering, spoke up from somewhere to Jake's left. This is what the council accepts now? Clumsy children stumbling through the stars? The humans have been here 5 years, and still they understand nothing. More laughter. More voices joining in. Helen grabbed Jake's arm hard enough to hurt. We're leaving. She practically dragged him toward the exit. Jake walked through a gauntlet of stares and whispers. He heard the word human repeated over and over, always with a slight edge of contempt, always with that tone that said, of course a human would do this. They made it to a side corridor before Helen let go of his arm. When she turned to face him, Jake had never seen her so angry. Do you have any idea what you just did? She demanded. It was an accident. Accident? Jake, you just insulted one of the most powerful species in the council. The Velkari have influence in sectors we're still trying to get trade access to, and you walked on their sacred platform wearing boots. I didn't know it was sacred. You should have known. That's your job. To know these things. Helen paced back and forth, her hands clenched into fists. I vouched for you. I told the director you were ready for this posting. And you make me look like a fool. I'm sorry, Helen. Coordinator Brooks. I'm truly sorry. Helen stopped pacing. She looked at him with something that might have been pity if it wasn't mixed with so much disappointment. Sorry doesn't fix this. The story is already spreading. By tomorrow, everyone on this station will know about the ignorant human who desecrated the Velkari greeting stone. Do you understand what that means for your career? For Earth's reputation? Jake didn't answer. He already knew. Report to your quarters, Helen said. I need to do damage control. Try not to cause any more disasters before I figure out how to salvage this. She walked away without another word. Jake stood alone in the corridor for a long time. Around him, the station hummed with life. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds, all going about their business, all of them knowing what they were doing, all of them belonging. He made his way back to his quarters through the service corridors, avoiding the main halls. His room was small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a window that looked out at the stars. He'd thought it was cozy when he first arrived. Now it just felt like a cell. He sat at the desk and pulled up his datapad. Then he started reading. Velkari culture, Velkari history, Velkari religious practices. The greeting stone was sacred because it represented the moment when two Velkari met as equals. Only unshod scales could touch it. Any other contact was considered a rejection of equality, an assertion of superiority. By walking on it with boots, Jake had essentially told the Velkari that he was better than them. No wonder Thelxus had been so angry. Jake read for hours. Then he started on other species. The Esesrathi, the Gorvan, the Hentari. Every tradition, every custom, every tiny detail he should have known. The Academy had covered all of this, he realized. He just hadn't paid enough attention. He'd thought he was ready. He was an idiot. 3 days passed. Jake didn't leave his quarters except to get food from the commissary. Even there, He felt the stares, heard the whispers. The story had spread exactly as Helen predicted. Everywhere he went, aliens looked at him with amusement or contempt or both. He became a joke. The barefoot blunder. He heard someone call him in Galactic Standard. The nickname stuck. By the end of the week, he heard it repeated in 6 different languages. Helen avoided him. The other human diplomats on the station avoided him. He ate alone in the observation deck late at night, when no one else was there. He watched the stars and felt very, very small. On the 8th day, Helen finally contacted him. Her message was brief. "My office. Now." Jake went. Helen's office overlooked one of the main docking bays. Through the window, Jake could see ships coming and going. The constant flow of galactic commerce. All those species, all working together. All except him. "Sit down," Helen said. Jake sat. Helen studied him for a moment. She looked tired. "The council has a situation," she said finally. "There's a mining dispute on Tanis. 4. The Valkyrie and the Gorvan Union are both claiming rights to the same deposits. It's escalating. Both sides have militias on the ground. If someone doesn't intervene soon, it could turn violent." Jake nodded slowly, not sure why she was telling him this. "The council needs someone to deliver a peace proposal to both sides," Helen continued. "Someone expendable." The word hit Jake like a punch. Expendable. Tanis 4 is dangerous. Hostile environment, trigger-happy miners, predators that can kill in seconds. Most diplomats won't take the assignment. Too risky. Helen leaned forward. "But you're going to volunteer." It wasn't a question. "This is my punishment," Jake said quietly. "This is your chance," Helen corrected. "You succeed. Maybe you salvage your career. You fail. Well, at least you fail somewhere far away from here." Jake looked out the window at the ships. Part of him wanted to refuse, to tell Helen to find someone else, but he knew there was no one else. Not for him. This was the only option he had. "When do I leave?" he asked. "Tomorrow. You'll take a courier ship. Travel alone. The proposal is already loaded into your datapad. Study it. Don't screw this up more than you already have." "Yes, coordinator." Helen's expression softened slightly. Just slightly. "Jake, I meant what I said. This is dangerous. You could die out there. If you're not ready." "I'm ready," Jake said. He wasn't sure if he believed it, but he said it anyway. Helen nodded. "Dismissed." Jake stood and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the panel. "Coordinator? Thank you for giving me the chance." Helen didn't look at him. She was already focused on her datapad. On the next problem that needed solving. "Don't thank me yet, just come back alive." Jake left the office and headed for his quarters. He had a lot to prepare. A dangerous world. 2 hostile species. A mission no one else wanted. But maybe, just maybe. A chance to prove he was more than the barefoot blunder. A chance to prove he belonged among the stars after all. The courier ship Wayfarer was small, old, and smelled faintly of recycled air and desperation. Jake sat in the pilot seat and watched the stars stretch into lines as the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. Meridian Station disappeared behind him. Along with it went the whispers, the stares, the constant weight of his failure. Out here, there was only him and the dark. The journey to Tanis 4 would take 6 days. 6 days alone, with nothing but his thoughts and the mission briefing. Jake had already read the briefing 17 times. He could recite it in his sleep. Tanis 4. Mining world. Rich in rare minerals. Discovered simultaneously by Valkyrie explorers and Gorvan prospectors. Both claimed ownership. Neither willing to back down. Tensions rising. Violence imminent. His job was simple on paper. Deliver the Council's peace proposal to both sides. Get them to agree to arbitration. Prevent a war. Simple on paper. Probably impossible in practice. Jake pulled up everything he could find about Tanis 4. The planet rotated slowly on his screen, a sphere of deep reds and greens. Beautiful from orbit. Deadly on the surface. Gravity was 1.3 times Earth standard. Breathable atmosphere, but with high levels of sulfur compounds. The smell would be terrible. Temperature swings from freezing at night to scorching during the day. Frequent acid rain. And the wildlife. Jake read the wildlife reports with growing concern. Razorback thornwolves, apex predators, 6 legs, armored hide, pack hunters, shadow stalkers, ambush predators that could change color to match their surroundings, spine crawlers, venomous arthropods the size of dogs. And those were just the documented species. Tanis 4 had only been surveyed from orbit. No one had spent more than a few days on the surface. No one wanted to. But the Velkari and Gorvan were desperate enough for the minerals to risk it. And now, Jake was desperate enough to risk it too. He spent his days studying. Not just the mission briefing, but everything. Velkari negotiation tactics, Gorvan logic patterns, the history of mining disputes in the sector, survival techniques for hostile worlds. That last one was important. The Velkari mining camp was on one continent. The Gorvan drilling site was on another. There were no roads connecting them. No air traffic allowed because both sides shot at anything that flew overhead. Jake would have to walk. The Wayfarer's computer estimated the journey at 48 hours of continuous travel through jungle terrain. Jake knew it would take longer. Much longer. He pulled up Earth's survival training database. Most diplomats never bothered with it. Why would they? They traveled in climate-controlled ships and stayed in comfortable stations. But Jake had grown up in Montana. His father had been a park ranger. Survival skills were something Jake actually knew. He studied plants, water purification, shelter building, fire starting, how to move through hostile territory without being detected, how to track game, how to become the hunter instead of the hunted. By day 4, Jake's eyes hurt from staring at screens, but he kept reading, kept learning, because out there, on that world, his diplomatic credentials wouldn't matter. His knowledge of proper bowing techniques wouldn't save him. Only skill would. Only the ability to adapt and survive. On day 6, the Wayfarer dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Tanis 4 filled the view screen. Jake stared at it. Somewhere down there, 2 species were ready to kill each other. And somewhere down there, Jake would either prove himself or die trying. The ship entered the atmosphere with a shudder. Jake gripped the controls, his knuckles white. The Wayfarer wasn't built for atmospheric flight. But it managed. Barely. He aimed for a clearing 3 kilometers from the Velkari camp. Close enough to reach on foot. Far enough to avoid getting shot down by paranoid miners. The landing was rough. The ship bounced twice before settling. Jake sat in the sudden silence, his heart pounding. Through the view screen, he could see Tanis 4 for the first time with his own eyes. Red soil. Purple and green vegetation that looked nothing like Earth plants. A sky that shifted between orange and deep crimson as clouds moved overhead. In the distance, mountains rose like jagged teeth. Beautiful, hostile, alien. Jake unsealed the cockpit and immediately regretted it. The smell hit him like a physical force. Sulfur mixed with something sweet and rotting. His eyes watered. He coughed, then forced himself to breathe normally. The smell wouldn't kill him. Probably. He checked his equipment one last time. Survival pack. Water purifier. Emergency beacon. Diplomatic credentials. The peace proposal on his datapad. A small pistol that Helen had given him with the comment. Jake holstered the pistol and stepped out of the ship. The gravity hit him immediately. 1.3 times Earth standard meant everything felt heavier. His legs, his arms, his pack. Every step took more effort. But Jake had prepared for this. He'd spent the last 2 days of the journey wearing weighted clothing. His muscles screamed, but they held. He oriented himself using the ship's navigation system. The Valkyrie camp was northeast. The sun was setting, which meant night was coming. Night, on Tanis, 4, when the temperature dropped and the real predators came out. Jake needed to move fast. He left the clearing and entered the jungle. Immediately, the world changed. The vegetation was dense, pressing in from all sides. Vines hung down like curtains. Strange flowers opened and closed as he passed, releasing puffs of pollen that made him sneeze. Everything was alive. Everything was watching. Jake moved carefully, testing each step. The ground was uneven, covered in roots and rocks. Easy to twist an ankle. Easy to fall. He used a fallen branch as a walking stick, pushing aside vegetation, checking for threats. An hour in, he heard his first thornwolf howl. The sound echoed through the jungle, impossibly loud. It started low and climbed higher, ending in something that sounded almost like laughter. Jake froze. His hand went to the pistol. The howl didn't repeat. But Jake knew they were out there. Watching. Waiting. He kept moving. Night fell fast. One moment there was light filtering through the canopy. The next, darkness. Jake pulled out a small light, but immediately turned it off. Light would attract predators. He'd have to navigate by moonlight. Tanis 4 had 2 moons. They cast strange, shifting shadows as they moved across the sky. Jake's eyes adjusted slowly. He could see shapes, outlines, enough to avoid walking into trees, but not enough to see the thornwolf until it was almost too late. It came from his left, silent as death. 6 legs, moving in perfect coordination. Armor plates gleaming in the moonlight. Eyes that reflected light, like mirrors. Jake threw himself backward. The thornwolf's jaws snapped shut where his throat had been a second before. He hit the ground hard, his pack cushioning the fall. The thornwolf landed, turned, and came at him again. Jake rolled, pulled the pistol, fired. The shot lit up the jungle for a split second. The thornwolf yelped and veered away. Jake had hit it, but not seriously. Armor plates. The shot had probably just pissed it off. He scrambled to his feet. The thornwolf circled him, growling low. Where there was one, there would be others. Pack hunters. He had seconds before the whole pack arrived. Jake didn't run. Running triggered chase instincts. Instead, he backed away slowly, keeping his eyes on the thornwolf. He reached into his pack without looking, pulled out a flare, twisted the cap. The flare ignited with a hiss, flooding the area with red light. The thornwolf flinched. Predators didn't like fire. Jake held the flare high and shouted. Made himself big. Made himself loud. Made himself scary. The thornwolf hesitated. Other shapes moved in the darkness around them. The pack. Deciding whether this strange creature was worth the risk, Jake took another step back, then another. The thornwolf watched but didn't follow. Finally, it turned and melted back into the jungle. The other shapes followed. Jake stood there for a full minute, shaking. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might break his ribs. But he was alive. He'd faced an apex predator and survived. He couldn't stay here. The flare had attracted attention. He could see things moving in the darkness now, drawn by the light. Jake dropped the flare and ran. He ran until his lungs burned. Until the gravity and his pack and his exhaustion combined to bring him to his knees. He collapsed next to a massive tree, gasping for air. No more thornwolf sounds. No more shapes in the darkness. Just the jungle and the night and Jake's ragged breathing. He'd made it. Jake climbed into the lower branches of the tree. Not high enough to be comfortable, but high enough to be safer than the ground. He secured himself with rope from his pack and allowed himself to rest. Above him, the 2 moons moved across the sky. Around him, the jungle sang its alien song. Clicks and whistles and sounds Jake had no names for. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt strangely calm. He'd been tested tonight. The thorn wolf could have killed him. Should have killed him, probably. But he'd reacted, adapted, survived. For the first time since stepping on that Valkyrie platform, Jake felt like he'd done something right. He closed his eyes. Sleep wouldn't come easy, but he needed rest. Tomorrow he'd reach the Valkyrie camp. Tomorrow the real work would begin. But tonight, alone in an alien jungle, Jake Morrison smiled. He was still alive, still fighting, and that had to count for something. What Jake didn't know was that someone had been watching his fight with the thorn wolf. Someone who'd followed him from the moment his ship landed. Someone who now watched from the higher branches of a nearby tree, considering what he'd seen. Vex, scout of the Krithax, tilted his head as he observed the sleeping human. The creature was weak by Krithax standards. Small. Slow. Its senses were dull. By all rights, it should have died to the thorn wolf. But it hadn't. It had fought with cunning. Used tools. Adapted its tactics. Refused to give up even when clearly outmatched. These were traits Vex understood. These were traits his people valued above all others. The human stirred in its sleep, making small sounds of distress. Dreaming, perhaps. Vex could kill it easily. One strike, and the human would never wake. But Vex didn't move. The human had shown strength tonight. Not the strength of body, but the strength of spirit. The strength of one who refuses to surrender to death. That was worthy of respect. Vex settled onto his branch and continued to watch. His pilgrimage required him to observe and learn. This human, it seemed, had much to teach. The jungle sang around them both. Predator and prey, hunter and hunted. But the lines between those categories were not as clear as they seemed. Not anymore. Jake woke to the sound of water. His body ached from sleeping in a tree. His neck was stiff. His legs felt like lead from the higher gravity. But he was alive, and the sound of running water meant he could refill his canteen. He climbed down carefully, checking the ground before dropping the last few feet. No thorn wolves. No obvious predators. Just the endless jungle, and that promising sound of water. He followed it to a stream. The water ran clear over red and black stones. It probably wasn't safe to drink without purification, but that's what the purifier was for. Jake knelt by the edge and filled his canteen. That's when he saw the blood. It was on the rocks downstream. Dark, purple, almost black. Fresh. Something had been hurt here recently. Something big. Jake's hand went to his pistol. He scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound except the water and the endless background noise of the jungle. He finished filling the canteen and moved away from the stream. Open water meant predators came to drink. Better to put distance between himself and the danger zone. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since yesterday. The survival pack had rations, but they wouldn't last forever. If he was going to make it to the Gorvan site after visiting the Valkyrie camp, he'd need more food, which meant hunting. Jake searched the area and found what he was looking for. Tracks in the soft earth. Small, three-toed prints. Some kind of ground bird, maybe. 40-o. Some kind of ground bird. He followed them for 20 minutes before he heard the soft clucking sounds. The creatures were about the size of chickens, covered in blue and green feathers. They pecked at the ground, completely unaware of Jake's presence. Jake pulled a rock from his pack. He'd practiced with a sling as a kid. His father had taught him. The oldest hunting tool in the world, his father had said, works just as well today as it did 10,000 years ago. Jake took aim and threw. The rock hit one of the birds square in the head. It dropped without a sound. The others scattered, squawking in alarm. Jake retrieved his kill and examined it. No obvious toxins. The meat looked normal. It would have to do. He built a small fire using dead wood and his emergency lighter. The smoke would be visible, but he needed to eat. Needed the energy. He cleaned the bird using his knife and roasted it over the flames. The meat was tough and tasted like nothing he'd ever eaten before. But it was protein. It was food. Jake ate every bite and felt strength return to his limbs. He was putting out the fire when he felt it. That prickling sensation on the back of his neck. The feeling of being watched. Jake stood slowly, his hand on the pistol. He turned in a circle, scanning the jungle. Nothing, but the feeling didn't go away. Something was out there. Something big. "I know you're there," Jake said to the jungle. His voice sounded small and foolish. "Show yourself." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the trees moved. No, not the trees. Something in the trees. Something massive. The creature that emerged from the jungle was like nothing Jake had ever seen. It stood nearly 8 feet tall on 2 powerful legs. Its body was covered in dark gray scales that shifted and rippled like liquid metal. 4 eyes, arranged in a square pattern on its elongated skull, focused on Jake with an intelligence that was immediately obvious. But it was the way it moved that truly terrified him. Despite its size, it made almost no sound. Each step was precise, controlled. This was a predator that had perfected the art of hunting. The creature stopped 10 feet away. It tilted its head, studying Jake the way a scientist might study a specimen, or the way a predator might study its next meal. Jake didn't run. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew that was wrong. Predators chased. Instead, he made himself bigger, spread his arms, stood his ground. The creature made a sound. Not quite a growl, more like a series of clicks and whistles. Then it spoke. "You do not flee." The words were in Galactic Standard, but heavily accented. The creature's mouth wasn't designed for human speech, but it managed. Jake's mind raced. This wasn't a mindless animal. This was a person. A very large, very dangerous person. "Running would be stupid," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You'd catch me in seconds." The creature's eyes seemed to gleam with something that might have been amusement. Truth. But most prey do not think. They only react. It took a step closer. "You think." "Ah. I try to," Jake said. "Who are you?" "Vex, scout of the Krythax." The creature, Vex, gestured at Jake. "And you are human. Far from your territory. Alone. Weak. Weak is a matter of perspective," Jake replied, though he knew it was a lie. Compared to this creature, he was absolutely weak. "Is it?" Vex moved with that same liquid grace, circling Jake. "You fought the Thornwolf last night. I watched. You should have died. I survived." "Yes. How?" Vex stopped in front of him again. All 4 eyes fixed on Jake with an intensity that was almost physical. "You are slower. Smaller. Your senses are dull. Your weapons are weak. The Thornwolf had every advantage. Yet, you live. Why?" Jake thought about the question. Really thought about it. "Because I didn't give up," he said finally. "Because I used what I had. Because dying wasn't an option." Vex was silent for a long moment. Then he made that clicking sound again. "You fight like kin." "Kin? My people, the Krythax." Vex sat down, a motion that was somehow both casual and intimidating. "We come from a death world. Our home kills the weak. Only those who adapt survive. Only those who refuse to surrender see another dawn." He gestured at the jungle around them. "This place reminds me of home. You survive here the way Krythax survive. This is why I ask." "How?" Jake lowered his arms slowly. His shoulders ached from holding them up. "I'm from Earth. My planet isn't as dangerous as this, but it has its own challenges. I grew up in the wilderness. My father taught me to hunt, to track, to respect nature and understand it." "Your father was a warrior?" "No. A ranger. He protected wild places. kept them safe. Vex tilted his head. A guardian of the hunt. This is a worthy role. He stood again, and Jake tensed. But Vex didn't attack. Instead, he reached out slowly and touched the wound on Jake's arm. Jake hadn't even realized he was bleeding. The thornwolf must have grazed him last night. You are injured, Vex said. Yet you hunt. Yet you move forward. Why? I have a mission, Jake explained. The Valkyrie and Gorvan are fighting over this planet. I'm supposed to convince them to stop. To negotiate. You are a speaker, not a warrior. I'm a diplomat, yes. Vex made a sound that might have been laughter. And your people send you alone to this death world? To walk through danger? To face hostile species? He shook his head. Either your people honor you greatly, or they wish you dead. Jake couldn't help but smile bitterly. Probably the second one. Why? And for some reason Jake couldn't quite explain, he told this alien hunter everything. About the ceremony. About stepping on the greeting stone. About the mockery and the shame and Helen's disappointment. About being called the barefoot blunder in 6 different languages. Vex listened without interrupting. When Jake finished, the Krithax was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, and his voice was different. Angry. Your counsel is broken, Vex said flatly. They judge strength by words instead of deeds. They give respect for titles instead of action. This is why the Krithax left. This is why we do not return. You were part of the council? Once. Long ago. We found it filled with cowards who hide behind protocol, who claim power through speech rather than proving their worth. Vex stood and began gathering items from the jungle. Plants, Jake realized. Medicinal plants. Among my people, respect is earned. You prove yourself through the hunt. Through survival. Through facing death without flinching. This human who mocked you, this ambassador. Has he survived a thornwolf? Has he crossed a death world alone? No, Jake admitted. Then his words mean nothing. His judgment means nothing. Vex returned and began crushing the plants. You have proven more in one night than most prove in a lifetime. This is strength. This is worthy of respect. Vex applied the crushed plants to Jake's wound. They stung, but the bleeding stopped. Among the Krithax, we do not care what species you are. We care what you do. You face death and survive? You are kin. You hide and speak empty words? You are nothing. He stepped back. You are kin, Jake Morrison. Young kin. Foolish kin, perhaps, but kin. Nonetheless, Jake stared at this massive alien creature. This hunter, who could kill him without effort. And he felt something he hadn't felt since stepping on that platform. Respected. Valued. Seen. Thank you, Jake said quietly. That means more than you know. Come, Vex said. Your Valkyrie camp is northeast. The path is dangerous. I will walk with you. You don't have to. I am on pilgrimage. A sacred hunt to prove my transition from scout to hunter. I must observe and learn. You have much to teach, Jake Morrison. And perhaps I have something to teach you as well. Why would you help me? Vex's 4 eyes gleamed. Because you are kin. And kin do not abandon kin. This is our way. Come. We have far to go. And the jungle grows more dangerous as the sun rises. They walked together through the jungle, the massive Krithax and the small human. Vex moved almost silently despite his size, while Jake crashed through the undergrowth like a child. But Vex didn't mock him. Instead, he taught, step there, not there. That ground is soft. You will sink. Watch the vines. Some are alive. They bite. The flowers that glow blue are poison. Even their pollen can kill. Jake absorbed everything, asking questions. Vex answered with patience, occasionally correcting Jake's footing or warning him of danger. They stopped at midday to rest. Jake shared his remaining rations. Vex produced some kind of dried meat from a pouch at his belt. They ate together in comfortable silence. "Tell me about the Krythax," Jake said finally. "Your people left the council." "Why?" Vex was quiet for a moment. "We joined the council many cycles ago. We hoped to find others who valued strength and honor. Instead, we found politics, lies, species who gained power through manipulation rather than merit. We watched weak leaders send strong warriors to die. We watched the cowardly prosper while the brave suffered. So you left. We left. Better to be alone and honorable than together and false." Vex looked at Jake. "But perhaps we were too quick to judge. Perhaps not all council species are the same. Perhaps there are still those who understand what true strength means. You think humans might be different? I think you might be different. One human does not speak for all. But one human can show us that possibility exists." Vex stood. "Come. We should reach the Valkyrie camp before nightfall, and I am curious to see how they react to you arriving with a Krythax at your side." Jake stood as well, shouldering his pack. "They'll probably be terrified." "Good," Vex said with that clicking laugh. "Fear keeps the mind sharp. They should be sharp when they negotiate with my kin." They walked on together as the sun climbed higher. Jake's legs still ached from the gravity. His wound still throbbed despite Vex's medicine. But somehow, he felt stronger than he had in weeks. He wasn't alone anymore. He had found something he hadn't expected on this death world. Not just survival. Not just a way forward. But a friend. A brother, in all but blood, kin. The Valkyrie mining camp appeared through the trees like a scar on the jungle's face. Prefabricated buildings, harsh lights, the constant sound of drilling equipment. Jake could see guards on the perimeter, their scales gleaming under the artificial lights. He and Vex stopped at the edge of the clearing. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. "Last chance to change your mind," Jake said. "If you walk in there with me, it's going to cause a scene." Vex's 4 eyes focused on him. "Good. Scenes are memorable. And you want them to remember you, yes? Not as the one who stepped on their sacred stone, but as the one who walks with the Krythax." Jake took a deep breath. Vex was right. Everything was about to change. For better or worse. "Let's go," he said. They walked toward the camp entrance together. Jake could see the exact moment the guards noticed them. One guard pointed. Another reached for a weapon. A third turned and ran back toward the main buildings, probably to raise an alarm. By the time Jake and Vex reached the gate, 6 guards stood blocking their path. All of them held weapons. All of them looked terrified. The lead guard, his scales a darker green than the others, stepped forward. His weapon was raised, but his hands shook slightly. "Identify yourselves," he demanded in Galactic Standard. "Jake Morrison, diplomatic liaison for Earth, representing the Galactic Council," Jake said clearly. "I'm here to deliver a peace proposal to Ambassador Thelxus." The guard's golden eyes flicked to Vex. "And that? I am Vex of the Krythax," Vex said, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. "I walk with my kin." The guards exchanged glances. Jake could practically see them trying to figure out what to do. Turning away a council diplomat would be bad. But letting a Krythax into their camp, that was terrifying. "The Krythax have not been seen in this sector for 50 years," the lead guard said slowly. "Your presence here is unprecedented." "Many things about today are unprecedented," Vex replied. "Will you keep us standing at your gate like beggars? Or will you show the hospitality your species claims to value?" The guard's jaw tightened. But he lowered his weapon. "Wait here. I will inform the ambassador." He disappeared into the camp. The other guards remained, weapons still ready, eyes never leaving Vex. Jake noticed that none of them looked at him. All attention was on the Krythax. For once, Jake was grateful to be overlooked. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Finally, the lead guard returned with someone new. Someone Jake recognized immediately. Ambassador Thelxus himself. The Velkari ambassador was even more imposing than Jake remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, scales gleaming like polished jade. He strode toward the gate with complete confidence, but Jake noticed his eyes. They were fixed on Vex, and in them was something Jake had never seen in a Velkari before: fear. Thelxus stopped a careful distance from the gate. "Jake Morrison," he said, his voice neutral. "I did not expect to see you again. Especially not here. Especially not in such company." "Ambassador Thelxus," Jake replied, bowing in the Velkari style. "I bring a peace proposal from the Galactic Council. The conflict between your people and the Gorvan Union threatens regional stability. The Council asks that both sides agree to arbitration." "The Council asks?" Thelxus's eyes never left Vex. "And the Krythax? What does he ask?" "I ask nothing," Vex said. "I observe. I walk with my kin. Where he goes, I go." "Kin." Thelxus repeated the word like it was poison. "You claim this human as kin?" "I claim nothing. I state fact. Jake Morrison has proven himself through deed and survival. He has faced death on this world, and not broken. Among the Krythax. This makes him kin. Do you dispute this?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Jake understood what Vex was doing. By claiming Jake as kin, he was putting the weight of the Krythax reputation behind him. To insult Jake now would be to insult the Krythax. And no one insulted the Krythax. Not if they wanted to survive. "I dispute nothing," Thelxus said carefully. "The Krythax are known for their wisdom in such matters." He turned his attention to Jake, really looking at him for the first time. Jake saw the ambassador notice his torn clothes, the bandage on his arm, the dirt and blood. "You walked here? Through the jungle?" "From my landing site, yes. 3 kilometers. 3 kilometers. Thelxus's tone was thoughtful now. Few species could survive such a journey. The jungle has claimed many Velkari lives since we established this camp, yet you made it alone." "Not alone," Jake corrected. "Vex guided me for the last part. Before that, he traveled alone," Vex added. "Survived a thornwolf attack. Hunted his own food. This is what I mean when I say, he is kin." Thelxus was silent for a long moment. Then he made a gesture, and the gates opened. "Very well. Jake Morrison, representative of Earth and kin to the Krythax, I grant you entry to our camp. You and your companion may present your proposal." They walked through the gate together. Jake could feel every eye in the camp on them. Velkari workers stopped what they were doing to stare. Some pointed. Some whispered. But none mocked. Not with Vex walking beside Jake. Thelxus led them to a large building in the center of camp. Inside was a meeting room with a table made of local stone. Several other Velkari were already there, advisors and officials by the look of them. They all stood when Vex entered. "Please, sit," Thelxus said, gesturing to chairs. The chairs were designed for Velkari. Too large for Jake, but he managed. Vex simply stood, his presence filling the room like a storm. Jake pulled out his datapad and placed it on the table. "The Council's proposal is simple. Both the Velkari and the Gorvan have legitimate claims to Tanis 4. Neither side can prove exclusive right. The Council suggests a joint operation. Share the mining rights, share the profits, and share the risk." "We were here first," one of the advisors said immediately. "Our explorers discovered this world 3 years ago. The Gorvan have survey records showing they identified Tanis 4 years ago," Jake replied. "Discovery is a matter of interpretation. What matters is that you're both here now. Both invested. Both bleeding resources into a conflict that helps neither side." "The Gorvan cannot be trusted," another advisor said. "They are cold. They care only for profit. And they say the Velkari are arrogant and rigid, Jake countered. Every species thinks they're right. Every species thinks the other is the problem. But you're both wrong. The problem is this planet. It's trying to kill everyone equally. Instead of fighting each other, fight that. Thelxus leaned back in his chair. You speak plainly, Jake Morrison. More plainly than most diplomats. Diplomacy on a death world requires different rules, Jake said. I walked through that jungle. I saw what it can do. You're losing people to this planet. So are the Gorvan. Every day you fight each other is a day the planet wins. And if we refuse the Council's proposal, Jake met Thelxus's golden eyes without flinching. Then you keep fighting, keep dying, and eventually, one side will win. But at what cost? How many Velkari lives is this mineral deposit worth, Ambassador? The room was silent. Thelxus stared at Jake, and Jake could see the Ambassador thinking, calculating. This wasn't the foolish human who'd stepped on the greeting stone. This was someone different, someone who'd survived what most Velkari couldn't. I cannot make this decision alone, Thelxus said finally. I must consult with my council. But I will consider the proposal seriously. You have proven yourself more capable than I believed, Jake Morrison. For that, you have my respect. Coming from Thelxus, that was huge. Jake nodded. Thank you. Ambassador, the proposal includes detailed frameworks for joint operations, profit sharing, and dispute resolution. It's all in the file I've sent to your systems. We will review it. Thelxus stood. You are welcome to stay in our camp tonight. The jungle is no place to be after dark. Thank you, but I must continue to the Gorvan site, Jake said. They deserve to hear the proposal as quickly as possible. The Gorvan site is on another continent. The journey will take days, through even more dangerous terrain. I know. Thelxus looked at Vex. You will accompany him? Where my kin goes, I go. Vex confirmed. Then may your journey be safe. Thelxus hesitated, then added, and Jake Morrison, when you return to the council, tell them the Velkari remember those who show true courage. We will not forget your journey here. They left the camp as night fell. The guards watched them go with something like awe. Jake and Vex walked back into the jungle. Back into the darkness. Back into danger. That went well, Jake said, once they were away from the camp. You did well. Vex corrected. You spoke with strength, not the empty words of diplomats, but truth. They heard you. Now I have to convince the Gorvan. The Gorvan are different. They value logic over emotion. You will need a different approach. I know. Jake paused at the edge of a stream. Vex, why are you really doing this? Helping me? You could complete your pilgrimage anywhere. Why stay with me? Vex was quiet for a long moment. You asked me once why I would help you. I said because you are kin. This is true. But there is more. He looked up at the two moons. I left my world to understand why the Krithaks abandoned the council. To see if we were right to isolate ourselves. I have watched the council for months now. Watched species that speak of honor, but show none. Watched weakness rewarded and strength punished. That must have been frustrating. It was confirmation. The council was exactly as broken as we believed. I was ready to return home and recommend we never return. Vex looked at Jake. Then I found you. A human alone on a death world. Sent here to fail. Mocked by those who would never have the courage to face what you face. And you didn't break. You survived. You adapted. You proved yourself. I'm just trying not to die, Jake said quietly. That is how all strength begins. The refusal to surrender. The determination to see another dawn. Vex placed a massive hand on Jake's shoulder. The gesture was surprisingly gentle. You showed me that perhaps not all council species are lost. That perhaps there is hope. This is worth more than any pilgrimage. This is worth protecting. Axe, Jake felt something in his chest tighten. Not fear. Something else. Gratitude. Pride. The knowledge that someone saw him. Really saw him. Not as the barefoot blunder. Not as the expendable diplomat. But as someone worth believing in. Thank you, Jake said. For everything. Thank me when we survive the Gorvan negotiations, Vex said with his clicking laugh. Come. We have far to walk, and the crystalline ones do not appreciate delays. They walked on through the night. The jungle sang around them with 1,000 dangerous voices. But Jake wasn't afraid anymore. He had Vex at his side. He had a mission to complete, and for the first time since stepping on that platform, he believed he might actually succeed. The stars wheeled overhead. Somewhere ahead lay the Gorvan drilling site. Another species to convince. Another challenge to overcome. But Jake had faced thornwolves and ambassadors, and survived both. He could face whatever came next. He had to. Because he wasn't just representing himself anymore. He was representing Earth. And now, in a way, he was representing the Krithax, too. He was kin. And kin didn't fail. The journey to the Gorvan drilling site took 3 days. 3 days of constant danger, exhaustion, and the slow grinding wear of Tanis IV's hostile environment. But Jake had Vex with him, and that made all the difference. They crossed a mountain range where the wind howled like a living thing. They forded a river that ran toxic and hot. They survived another thornwolf attack. This time, working together, Vex distracted while Jake flanked. They brought the beast down as a team. Each night, they made camp and talked. Vex told stories of the Krithax homeworld, of hunts that lasted weeks, of the sacred fires where warriors proved their worth. Jake talked about Earth, about Montana forests, and the stars his father had taught him to navigate by. They were different species from different worlds, but the differences mattered less with each passing hour. On the 3rd day, they reached the Gorvan site. Where the Velkari camp had been organic and somewhat chaotic, the Gorvan site was the opposite. Everything was precise, mathematical. Crystalline structures rose from the red earth in perfect geometric patterns. The drilling equipment moved with mechanical efficiency. Even the guards that met them at the perimeter stood at exact angles. The Gorvan were a silicon-based species. Their bodies looked like living crystal, transparent and faceted, with light moving through them in shifting patterns. They communicated partly through sound and partly through light patterns in their bodies. The lead guard's body flashed blue. Identify yourselves. Jake repeated his introduction. The guard's light patterns shifted to yellow, then green, then back to blue. Processing. Calculating. Finally, the guard spoke again. We have received communication from the Velkari camp. Ambassador Thelxis informed us you would arrive. You and your Krithax companion are expected. Follow. Endasses. Wine. Endasses. That was easier than Jake had expected. Apparently, Thelxis had sent word ahead. Maybe the Velkari ambassador was taking the peace proposal seriously after all. The Gorvan led them to a building that looked like a giant crystal. Inside, the walls refracted light into rainbows. A conference room held a table and chairs, though the chairs were clearly designed for crystalline bodies. Jake sat awkwardly. Vex stood as always. 3 Gorvan entered. The lead one was larger than the others, his crystal structure more complex. Light moved through him in intricate patterns. When he spoke, his voice was like wind chimes. I am Coordinator Zix. I lead this operation. You bring a proposal from the council? Yes, Coordinator. Jake pulled out his datapad again. He'd prepared differently for this meeting. The Velkari responded to emotion and honor. The Gorvan would respond to logic and data. The Velkari responded to logic and data. The Council proposes joint operations between Velkari and Gorvan forces. Shared mining rights, shared costs, shared profits. I've prepared an analysis showing this approach yields a 23% increase in efficiency and a 41% reduction in casualties. Zix's light patterns shifted rapidly. He was interested. Show me this data. Jake did. For the next hour, they went through numbers, projections, cost analyses, risk assessments. The Gorvan asked sharp questions. Jake answered each one with data he'd prepared during the journey. He'd expected this to be harder. But the truth was, the math supported the proposal completely. Fighting each other made no logical sense. Working together maximized profit while minimizing loss. Your analysis is sound, Zix said finally. But you assume the Valkyrie will honor their agreements. They are an emotional species. Unpredictable. So are humans, Jake pointed out. But we're capable of keeping our word. The Valkyrie have operated within council frameworks for centuries. They understand contracts and consequences. Perhaps. Zix's lights flickered orange, a sign of uncertainty. But this requires trust. Trust is not logical. Actually, it is. Jake countered. Trust is a calculated risk. You assess the potential benefits against potential losses. In this case, the benefits far outweigh the risks. Even if the Valkyrie violated the agreement, you'd be no worse off than you are now. But if they honor it, you gain significantly. Zix was silent for a long moment. Then his lights shifted to green. You argue well for a species so young. Tell me, Jake Morrison, how did you reach our site? The terrain between here and the Valkyrie camp is exceptionally hostile. I walked. With Vex's guidance, you survived a journey that has killed 3 of our exploration teams. Zix's lights flickered with what might have been respect. This demonstrates significant capability. The Krithax vouches for you? Vex spoke for the first time since they'd entered. Jake Morrison is my kin. I stand witness to his strength. The word kin seemed to carry weight even with the logical Gorvan. Zix's lights shifted through several colors rapidly. The Krithax do not grant such recognition lightly. If they see worth in you, perhaps there is logic in trusting your proposal. The proposal isn't mine, Jake said. It's the Council's. But I believe in it. I've seen what this planet does to both your species. I've walked through the danger. The real enemy here isn't each other. It's Tanis for itself. United, you have a chance. Divided, the planet will kill you all, eventually. A grim assessment. But accurate. Zix stood. I will present your proposal to my board. We will analyze the data and provide a response within 3 cycles. Will you remain at our site during this time? If you'll have us, you are welcome. Any associate of the Krithax is granted hospitality. Your companion may find our facilities uncomfortable. However, we do not accommodate silicon-based metabolism well. I require little. Vex said. I will manage. Vex said, I will manage. They were given quarters in one of the crystal buildings. The room was beautiful but cold. Geometric perfection without warmth. Jake lay on a bed designed for Gorvan and stared at the ceiling. They'll accept, Vex said from where he sat by the window. You think so? The Gorvan value efficiency above all else. Your proposal is efficient. They will accept. Vex tilted his head. The question is whether the Valkyrie will agree. Emotions are harder to predict than logic. Thelxus seemed open to it. Seemed. But words and actions are different things. Vex looked at Jake. What will you do if one side accepts and the other refuses? Jake hadn't let himself think about that. I don't know. Try to find a middle ground, I guess. Keep negotiating. Then go to ground. And if that fails, then I failed. At least I tried. Vex made his clicking sound. You have learned much, young kin. To accept failure as a possibility while still striving for success. This is wisdom. 3 days later, Zix summoned them back to the conference room. His lights were blue and steady. Calm. Decided. "We have analyzed your proposal thoroughly," Zix said. "The mathematics support joint operations. The potential gains justify the risks. The Gorvan Union accepts the Council's proposal, contingent on Velkari acceptance and proper contract implementation." Jake felt relief flood through him. "Thank you, Coordinator. This is the right choice. It is the logical choice," Zix corrected. "But you have earned respect through your journey here. Few species would attempt what you accomplished. The Gorvan Union acknowledges your capability. Coming from the emotion-free Gorvan, that was high praise. We received communication from Ambassador Thelxis this morning," Zix continued. "The Velkari have also agreed to the proposal. Both sides are willing to enter negotiations for a formal treaty." Jake stared at him. "Both sides agreed?" "Yes." "Your mission is complete, Jake Morrison. You have accomplished what you were sent to do." Jake sat down, not trusting his legs. He'd done it. Against all odds, on a deathworld, with every reason to fail, he'd actually succeeded. "I'll arrange for transport back to Meridian Station for both of you," Zix said. "Unless you prefer to remain on Tanis 4? "No," Jake said quickly. "I've seen enough of this planet to last a lifetime." Zix's lights flickered in a pattern that might have been amusement. "I suspect Tanis 4 feels the same about you." The trip back to Meridian Station took 6 days. This time, Jake traveled on a proper transport ship with real beds and food that didn't try to kill him. Vex came with him. The Krythax had decided his pilgrimage was complete. He'd learned what he needed to learn. As they approached the station, Jake felt nervousness building. He'd succeeded in his mission. But what came next? Would the Council care? Would Helen take credit? Would anyone even believe what he'd accomplished? The ship docked. Jake and Vex disembarked together. The dock was busy as always, full of aliens coming and going. But as Jake walked through the crowds, he noticed something different. People moved aside for him. Not in mockery, in respect. Eyes followed him, but not with amusement. With something like wonder. News traveled fast in the station. Everyone knew what he'd done. Helen met him at the entrance to the diplomatic section. She looked different somehow. Smaller, maybe. Or maybe Jake had gotten bigger. "Jake," she said. "Welcome back. The Council wants to see you immediately. They've called a full session." "A full session? Why?" Helen didn't answer. She just gestured for him to follow. The Council chamber was packed. Every seat filled. Every species represented. Jake walked to the center of the floor, Vex at his side. Hundreds of eyes watched him. Among them, Jake saw Ambassador Thelxis. The Velkari gave him a small nod. The council speaker, an ancient Yulani with silver skin, called the session to order. "We are gathered to hear the report of Jake Morrison, diplomatic liaison for Earth, regarding his mission to Tanis 4. Jake stepped forward. He'd prepared a formal report during the journey. But standing here, in front of all these beings who'd mocked him, he decided to skip the formality. "The mission was successful," he said simply. "Both the Velkari and Gorvan have agreed to joint operations on Tanis 4. Treaty negotiations are underway. The conflict has been resolved." Murmurs ran through the chamber. The speaker raised a hand for silence. "You accomplished in 2 weeks what senior diplomats believed impossible." "How?" Jake thought about his answer. He could tell them about the data analysis he'd prepared for the Gorvan, about the emotional appeals he'd made to the Velkari, about the careful negotiating and the prepared arguments. But that wasn't the real answer. "I survived," Jake said. "I walked through a death world and didn't quit. I faced predators and danger, and I kept going. Both the Velkari and the Gorvan saw that. They saw someone who didn't just talk about courage but showed it. That made them listen." "You also had assistance," the speaker said. looking at Vex. The Krythax have not participated in council affairs for over 50 years. Yet one of them accompanied you. Why? Vex stepped forward. Jake Morrison is my kin. He has proven himself through action, not words. The Krythax value such proof. We watch the council, see weakness elevated and strength dismissed. Jake Morrison reminded us that true worth still exists among council species. The chamber erupted in conversation. The speaker had to call for silence 3 times. The council recognizes Jake Morrison's achievement, the speaker said finally. But there is another matter. We have received a communication from the Krythax matriarch. She wishes to address this body. Cried. A screen appeared above the chamber. On it was a Krythax female, even larger than Vex, covered in scales that shifted from black to deep red. Her 4 eyes held ancient wisdom and absolute authority. Council species, the matriarch said, her voice carrying perfect authority. I am Matriarch Sora of the Krythax. For 50 years, my people have watched you from afar. We left because we saw a council that valued appearance over substance, politics over principle. We believed the council had lost its way. The chamber was completely silent. Then one of your junior diplomats walked across a death world, Sora continued. He survived what most would not. He proved himself not through title or species or connections, but through deed. My scout Vex witnessed this and recognized him as kin. This is the highest honor the Krythax can grant. Sora paused, her gaze seeming to look directly at Jake even through the screen. Jake Morrison of Earth has shown us that perhaps the council is not entirely lost, that there are still those who understand strength. Therefore, the Krythax will return to the council, not as members, but as observers and allies to those who prove themselves worthy. The chamber exploded in sound. Questions shouted in a dozen languages. The implications were enormous. The Krythax were legendary. Their return, even in a limited capacity, shifted the entire balance of galactic power. We recognize certain species and individuals as kin, Sora said over the noise. Those granted this status are under Krythax protection. To dishonor them is to dishonor us. To threaten them is to threaten us. Let it be known that Jake Morrison and the species Earth are recognized as kin. The screen went dark. The chamber fell silent again. Jake stood there, overwhelmed. The matriarch had just declared Earth under Krythax protection. Any species that wanted to mess with humanity now had to consider the wrath of the galaxy's most feared warriors. Earth's status had just been elevated to something no one could have imagined. The speaker recovered first. The council accepts the matriarch's declaration with honor. Jake Morrison, you are awarded the council's Star of Unity for exceptional diplomatic achievement. You have brought peace to Tanis IV and renewed ties with the Krythax. The council recognizes your service. Applause filled the chamber. Real applause, not the polite kind. Jake saw Ambassador Thelxis stand and begin the Velkari gesture of respect. Other species joined in with their own traditions. The Esisrathi representative who'd called him a stumbling child was conspicuously silent. Later, Jake stood in the observation deck where he'd eaten alone so many weeks ago. The stars stretched before him, infinite and beautiful. So much had changed. He'd left this station as a joke and returned as a hero. It felt surreal. You look troubled, Vex said, joining him at the window. I'm not troubled, just thinking. Jake smiled. I came here thinking I needed to fit in, to follow every rule perfectly, to be what they expected. And that almost destroyed me. But you learned better. I learned that respect isn't given, it's earned. Through action, not appearance. Through deed, not words. Jake looked at his reflection in the window. He barely recognized himself. I gained more respect by being myself, by surviving and adapting, than I ever could have by following protocols. This is the Krythax way. Now it is your way too. Vex placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. You are young still, much to learn. But you have proven yourself. The path forward is yours to choose. Will you stay? On the station? For a time. The matriarch has assigned me as liaison to the council. I will observe, report, and... Vex's lights along his scales flickered with amusement. Ensure my kin is not dishonored. Thank you, Vex, for everything. I wouldn't have survived Tanis 4 without you. Perhaps. Perhaps not. You survived alone before I found you. I simply made the journey easier. Vex looked out at the stars. We will hunt together again, Jake Morrison. This I promise. But for now, you have proven yourself to the council. What comes next? Jake thought about that. He'd accomplished his mission, saved his career, brought honor to Earth. But more than that, he'd found something he'd been missing. Purpose, confidence, the knowledge that he could face impossible odds and survive. I keep working, Jake said. There are more conflicts to resolve. More species who need someone willing to walk into danger. Maybe I can help. The council needs diplomats who understand real strength, Vex agreed. Go where others will not. Survive what others cannot. You will do well, kin. A message appeared on Jake's datapad. It was from Helen, brief and professional. Good work, Morrison. You've been promoted to senior liaison. Report to my office tomorrow to discuss assignments. You've earned it. Jake smiled. Not long ago, Helen had sent him to die on a deathworld. Now she was promoting him. Funny how things changed. His datapad chimed again. This message was different. Krithak's script, with a translation below. The pack grows stronger when new blood joins. You are kin. You are remembered. You are welcome at the fire. When you are ready, come to our world. Hunt with us. Learn from us. Prove yourself again and again until your legend matches your deeds. You have begun your journey, Jake Morrison. Make it worthy of song. Matriarch Sora. Jake read it 3 times. An invitation to the Krithak's homeworld. Few outsiders ever received such an honor. Even fewer survived the experience. He was terrified. He was excited. He was ready. I'll go, he said to Vex. When the time is right, I'll accept the matriarch's invitation. Talpsa. When the time is right. Telpseth. Good. But not yet. You are strong, but not strong enough. The fire requires those who have proven themselves many times over. Tanis 4 was your first test. There will be others. Vex's 4 eyes gleamed. Pass them all. And perhaps one day you will truly earn the title you now carry. Kin. They stood together at the window, watching the stars. Behind them, Meridian Station hummed with life. 1,000 species, 1,000,000 voices, all the complexity and chaos of the galactic community. Jake had a place here now. Not because of his title, not because of protocols or procedures, but because he'd faced death and survived. Because he'd proven himself when everyone expected him to fail. He was no longer the barefoot blunder. He was Jake Morrison. Diplomat. Survivor. Kin to the Krithaks. And his story was just beginning. The stars waited. Danger waited. Challenge waited. But Jake wasn't afraid anymore. He'd learned something important on that death world. Something that would stay with him forever. Humans might not be the strongest species. They might not be the smartest, or the fastest, or the most advanced. But they had something that mattered more than any of that. They endured. They adapted. They survived. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. Jake smiled at his reflection in the window. Behind him, the lights of the station flickered. Ahead of him, the infinite stars beckoned. Ready for whatever comes next? Vex asked. Jake nodded. Always. They walked away from the window together, kin in spirit if not in blood. Behind them, the stars wheeled on through the darkness. And somewhere among them, new challenges waited. But Jake Morrison would be ready. He'd proven that much already.